Hello and welcome to another Bodgit and Leggit video. Now we have a 2008 Astra, Opel Astra here, Vauxhall in other countries. And what's happening is, as you drive down the road, it kind of feels like the back of the car isn't connected to the front of the car. On a straight bit of road, if you kind of twitch the steering wheel, the back of the car seems to kind of continue. It's a weird feeling, and that normally means there's something wrong with your back suspension. You can also feel when you go around the corners and the car just kind of bounces. It doesn't feel right, it feels weird. And we have the rear axle bushings gone. Now it's a common problem with these. They do go, and they can be a bit of a nightmare, especially trying to get out, but hopefully we won't have too much of a problems. Now what I'm going to do is, there's a couple of easy ways of doing it. I don't particularly want to take the axle completely off, because that means connecting brake lines and handbrake cables and all that sort of stuff. I don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do is, done it before, so we're going to see if it works again. I'm going to take out the springs, take off the wheels, and disconnect the bolt here and let the axle spin on the actual shock. So I'm going to push it down like this so it springs, and then I'm going to wedge it so it can't go back up, and then we can work on the actual rear bushing. And it just saves having to disconnect everything. Now there's a few ways you can take off the shock or the spring. You can take off the wheel, which we're going to have to anyway. Disconnect the bolt for the shock. That will drop the axle down a bit more. Whip out the springs, put the shock bolts back in, and let it kind of twist on it. There's a few ways you can take the actual springs off. You can use them horrible death clamp springs, which I don't like to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to whip off both wheels, and I'm going to take off the bolt for the shock at the bottom. That will allow me to pivot the axle on the two front bushings that we're replacing. These springs will pop out, and then going to put the bolts back, not completely tight, but just put the bolts back, let that drop, and I should hopefully then be able to spin it forward and down, and then we can work on the actual bushings themselves. So I'm going to whip off the wheels first. I'm sure there's no lock nuts. Whip off the wheels, and then we'll get to the shocks. Sorted. And yes, I know the brakes are bad, but we're doing that later on in a different video. There's the bolt I was talking about. It's an E20 inverted torque, so we've got that ready. I've also got my transmission stand or transmission jack underneath the axle, just because it's going to drop a little bit and it's just going to be easier to support it. So I'm going to take off both of these. It's easier to take off both of them. It gives you a lot more room. Then we'll take out both springs together. Right, hopefully you can see that. As you can see, I've just lowered the transmission jack down a bit, and that just gives me room to remove both springs. Just right there. Now all I'm going to do, jack this back up, put the two bolts back in loosely, not completely tight, and then we should be able to pivot this the other way and wedge it somehow. I normally use a piece of wood, and then we can actually work on the front bushings. It just saves you having to take all these lines and stuff off. It just makes your life a lot easier. So I'm just going to jack this up, put these two bolts back in, and then we'll get to the actual bushings themselves. Now what you can actually do is, because there's no spring in there now, I should be able to lift this up by hand and just, yeah, get that back in. And there we go. Do the same on the other side. And this should now pivot on the actual bolt for the shock. Lovely. Right, so we've got an 18mm bolt and an E18 bolt head, which is an inverted torque. Can be a bit tricky to get to because of the handbrake cable and that, but possible. I need to move that handbrake cable down a bit, get it away from the leg of the lift. And I'm not actually taking away the three bolts that hold it on, just because, and what I mean by that, the three bolts that hold the axle on, because you can just put this back in exactly the same place. It's just easier. Regardless, you're going to have to get it tracked after this anyway. Thinking about it now, the problem we might have is trying to get this bolt all the way out So I think we are going to have to drop yeah. If they just put the bolt in from the other way, we wouldn't have this issue. This is just stupid now. See if I can get you in there explaining. As you can see, we've taken off the bolt, but it's now hitting the sill, or the inner sill here. So we're going to have to take this whole cup down just to release the bolt. You just can't quite see it there. There it is. Which is just stupid. So I'm going to do the same again on this side. And then what I'm going to have to do is, we're going to have to mark this. You can mark it with Tipp-Ex, anything, get a flat-blade screwdriver, you want to mark it. We have to put it down so we know we can get it in roughly the same place. But like I said, this is going to have to be tracked anyway. But there we go. More stuff to take off. Right, what I'm going to actually do is, because I'm struggling to film with light and everything, and I'm going to get in the way, I'm going to take off these 3 bolts first, which should be the same. Just check. Yeah. E18 inverted torque. And take off them 3. I'm going to leave the other side completely done. So the other side I haven't touched yet. I'm just going to lower this down enough so I can get the bolt out. Then I'm going to screw them 3 plate bolts back in, and I'm going to do the other side. At least this way we're not going to move the axle too much. We don't have to completely drop both sides at once. And then I'm going to put that bolt in from the opposite way when I put it back together, because it doesn't need to be that way. It's just stupid. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. 3 bolts out, lower this down, pull that bolt out, screw that back up, same on the other side. Then I'll turn the camera back on and we'll get to getting out the bushing. Right, I said I'd quickly show you this. I've loosened the 3 bolts. The other side is completely fine. It hasn't been touched. Hopefully that puts a bit more light on the situation. So this can't really move too much, but like I said, regardless, you're going to have to get it tracked anyway. There is a bit of movement in this, so if the tracking's slightly off, you can't do too much, but you can move these a little bit. So just push that down. Hopefully we get enough room. Get this in a slightly different place maybe. And doesn't want to play ball. There we go. And as you can see, we removed the bolt. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it in this side going back in. Makes no difference, but it means it's going to be a lot easier next time. We don't have to take this bracket off like that. So there we go. So I'm going to do the same with the other side. And then you can just see how much this is moving internally. You can see that. And then we're going to whip off. Oh, there we go. You can actually see that's not supposed to come out like that. And you can see, well, I'll show you, but you can see just how much that's opened up. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Screw that back into place, do the same with the other side, and then we'll get to take the bushing out. Right, people, not sure what happened, but this is when it all starts getting a bit funny. I'm having problems with my microphone, my camera battery, losing videos, and just whatever. So all I'm explaining here is how I'm actually taking the bushing out. Now I do show a couple of different ways. The first way I'm going to show you is how to take it out if you've got air tools. And then I realised, well, maybe not everyone has air tools. And there is a special tool for pushing the bushing in, but it will also take the bushing out. So there's going to be more chances people having the tool than kind of having air tools plus the tool. But I lost the camera footage when I was actually taking it out with the air tool. But I'll quickly go through how I was doing it. So if you have it, at least you can do it this way. But like I said, if you've got the actual air tool, to use that, or to use the tool, if you've got the tool, it's easier. As you can see, what I'm doing is I'm marking the bushing before I take it out, because this is very important. As you can see, from the style of the bushing, it has a special raised edge on it, so you can't just put this in any way. So I've marked the axle where the 2 points of the rubber meet. So this means I know I can put it back in exactly the same place, which is going to make your life so much easier. Because if you get this wrong, the car is going to handle and just, well, it's just going to be awful. So next, you can see, what I do is I show you the lip of the bushing. So the where my finger is now is the lip, and that's the actual axle. So I bend that in with the air tool. You'll see now in a second. and then I get the air tool at the back here and I just use to push the bushing out. But I do have a very powerful air gun and obviously a big air compressor, so this way is okay for me, but not okay if you don't actually have the tools. So what you're going to see me do now is actually bend the edge around with the air tool. So I'm just using a chisel bit and a very powerful air gun, or air chisel should I say, and this is Big Daddy. She's powerful. So Big Daddy, she's powerful. Yeah, that works. So all I'm doing is just bending the edge, and I will show you that in a second. Just going all the way around. There's no point in me showing this because this is just going to look boring, but essentially I go all the way around. You will then see how it looks like as soon as the camera focuses of what I do. And you can spray lube and stuff in there and all sorts to make your life a lot easier. And I think this is where I lose the footing. So you can see I've completely gone round the whole width of it now, or the whole circumference. Pushed it all in with the chisel. Be very careful you do this. You do not want to damage the axle. You damage the axle and you put the chisel inside there, you will, well, you'll have to buy a new axle. So do not, under any circumstances, do that. Get your chisel then from behind, and you might have to go up and down, side to side with the actual chisel. So 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, blah, 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 blah. And that will come out nice and easy for you. This is the worst part. I've got a dodgy battery, which I have just thrown so far. I missed this. The camera hasn't been recording sound for the last 3 or 4 clips, so I'm going to have to edit that in. But I've missed the most important part, which is really frustrating. I was talking about how to remove this bushing. This bushing was in here. I can put it back in, but it's not the point now. I marked it before I took it out, which I did. I think I got all this on camera. So I marked it before I took it out. And then what I did is I bent in the end with my chisel. So there's a lip around here, and I bent all that in, as you can see, which makes it easier to bring it out. Then I went from the back. As you can see, there's 3 kind of divots in the back of it with the chisel, like that, bang, and it came out nice and easy, like it should have done. Just frustrating. And the camera stopped, and the file is on there, but I can't play it. Just really frustrating. It's quicker, but I'm really, really, really pissed off that I can't get it. I'm going to try and get the video back if I can, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm waiting now for the new bushings to come. We're going to press them in, and yeah, but what a nightmare. What a nightmare. Right, just problems after problems after problems. You knew when I actually took this out with the air tools, the camera battery switched off because the battery's no good, and I lost the video. So what I decided to do is push this back in and show you the tool on actually how to remove this, with the tool to remove it and install it, in case you don't have, you know, powerful compressors, air tools and stuff like that. You can use the tool to take it in and take it out. The bushing has come wrong again. So here is the bushing. There's the old one. This is the new one that's came, which is actually a wishbone bushing, which is completely wrong. So yeah, just a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is, it's a Sealey tool. It's a VSE4787, the trailing arm bushing tool. So I'm going to show you how to remove it and install it when we get the new ones. They're on the way. The joys, just the joys. So let's get it set up. I'll show you what's in the kit and we'll go from there. Sorted. Right, so this is the tool, the VSE4787. It's a Sealey tool. And this is what you get. This is what you need to take it off. So you need this bar and this connection here. That's what's actually going to take it off, and it's going to press it from the back or from the front side, and it's going to push the bushing inside this cup here. And then to put it back on, you need these bits. So you need this arm, this cup, and this cup, which I'll show you again. You can see this is actually spaced out because there's a big kind of rubber part on the bushing, which I will show you. So what I'm going to get is this, and this to actually take it off. What I'm going to do first is, I'm just going to screw this. You can actually see that inside here is a cutout because the bushing, wherever the old one's gone, what we're done with that. You see the back of the bushing, or the front of it, however you want to look at it, has this big rubber lip. So that fits over the rubber lip, which gives it a nice seal on it also. And obviously this can pass through the axle. So if I spin you around, this comes from this side, but as you can see, it'll go through the axle and push the bushing this way into the cup. So hopefully you got that. So what I'm going to do is screw this down into here first. Just like that, and then push this all the way through, line it up. It is important to line it up. Now this piece of wood most probably is in our way. This next bit, we'll just move it out of our way. Just like that. Now, this is the big kind of cup, and as you can see, it's cut out again to fit on the axle, so it fits through the axle. And I get it right. What I do need to do is just loosen off these wing nuts first. Now that sits all the way on, and hopefully I'll be able to get you to this so you can see a bit better. So as you can see, the tool actually hugs the axle really well. The cutout is designed to come over the axle. Now this does more than just Astras, it does a few different types. So you can see there's different cutouts, but you can see this sits nicely on the axle, so it gives it a proper... The bushing then is going to come out and slide into this cup. So hopefully, and as you can see, that will slide through. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And obviously, yes, I have beaten it because that's the way I did it when I was taken out with the air tool, but you're going to get the idea. What you do want to be careful, you want to get this lined up nice and straight, because as you can see, we've got a lot of movement. If you line this up crooked, you're going to have a hell of a time trying to get it out. So you want it nice and straight, and you use these wing nuts to actually level the tool up. That looks good. It's leveled up, and it's in there now. So now all I do is get this special nut, which is essentially got a bearing in it, so it means I can turn it easier. There's not any pressure against here. This screws on, and what this is going to do is this essentially is going to make the rod shorter. As the rod gets shorter, it's going to push the bushing out. This is the time, if you want, clean it up, get a bit of lube in there to make everything as easy as possible. I think off the top of my head that's 24 mil. You do not want to be using air tools on this, it is 24. And all you do is keep screwing that in. Now we'll try and get you in a bit better position to see this. This is going to work, and what you should see is this slide into the axle, and you should see the bushing come out. Now if you're really struggling at this, you're going to have to stop and make sure you've got everything lined up properly. And this can take a bit of time. As you can now see, the bushing is coming out. This was going in a little bit, but it doesn't matter now. The bushing is now coming out. So I'm just going to keep doing this. And again, as you're doing it, you can be spraying some lubing, getting everything. Just keep checking, making sure the gap is evenly around here. It's not, this metal plate here isn't lipping over the axle, because if it is, it's not going to be able to push. So you need to make sure it's in. And just keep screwing it out. So there we go. Once you get it out enough, it will kind of come out easy. Now yes, I did take that out obviously first, but you still get the idea of this tool in action. Now, keep getting interrupted. And there we go. As you can see, that's now come through. You just want to keep going, make sure it's definitely out, which it is, and undo them. And then this whole thing will slide out and your bushing is inside there. Ready to put the new one in? There we go, nice and easy. Now, we're lucky with this one. We don't really have any rust in there at all. There is a bit of paint flaking, but there is actually no rust in there at all. So you only really need to start rubbing this if there's rust. Don't take too much off. If you take too much off, the bushing's going to be loose. It's never going to fit right. You do want it to be kind of, you know, a real tight fit for obvious reasons. But if you look in there, just try and get the camera in, there's no actual rust in there. So I'm not going to do anything with this side. The far side needs a little bit maybe, but this side, so I'm just going to get some light sandpaper and just do it by hand. I don't like using any machines in here because, you know, you can take, you know, a lot of metal off quite quickly and you're going to need a new axle then. So I'm really happy with that. Wait for the new bushings to get here. Use the different ends of the tools then, and we'll push the new one in, get it bolted up, give it back to the customer. Sorted. We are ready to put the new ones on. As you can see, this one has this actually built into it, not a part of it. Now, when you're taking it off, one thing I did forget to say, you're going to see the back of the bushing like that, and you're going to say, well, hold on, where is that ring that I was talking about? This bit just comes off. And as you can see, you're left with that stub. So that's how the other side. Now, another thing I forgot to say is the marks that we put on, sometimes when you put that tool on, it can slightly rub off the marks. So you want to make sure the marks are definitely there, nice and big and bright. And if you do have a problem, after you took the tool off, just remark them. Now what I'm going to do is the two pink marks I've got, I'm going to put this in. This bushing goes in, say maybe 80%, well 70% of the way first, before you actually have to press it in. And I'm just lining up them two marks with the edges of my marks there. So I know that's more or less bob on. And just a little tap just to kind of keep it there. Now I have seen people smack these in and smack them out, but honestly you just don't want to do it because you will do damage. You have to be so careful of the actual axle, because if you damage the axle, the bushing's never going to sit in right, you're going to need a new axle. The right tools for the job, you know, they do make life a lot easier. And you know, once you've pushed this in, you haven't damaged it. And it's going to last for as long, well, depending on what you do with the car, of course, but it's going to last for a long time. Now, so this is the tool. I've just shoved this threaded bar on again, that just screws out. But as you can see, we have a huge lip here and a cutout there, which lines up perfectly with this, which means we're putting pressure on the whole bushing, not just this part or not just this part. So this just slides in. Now, as you can see, let's get you around here so you can see what I'm doing. Now we need to twist that until that sits in properly. Like that, you can see the difference. That's it sitting on there, that's no good. Twist it until it slots in the hole. Now we're putting pressure on the whole bushing. But what you also want to do is we have a lip here, so we can't go too far. Once that lip hits here, we know we're in the right place. But what you also want to do is get a bit of lube. Just lube it up, it just helps. You can put a bit from the back side as well. Now what is important is to line up this back tool properly, because the bushing does stick out a little bit, and if this isn't lined up, this is going to hit flush with the axle and it's not going to allow the bushing to come all the way through. And there is a cutout here, so you can actually see what you're doing, but you can see the movement I've got in here. So we need to get that spot on. Easiest way to do it is screw the nut on first. Get it close. I just like to line it up like that, and now I know I can screw that down like that. I now know that is level. It's going to push this bushing through. Sorted. Then again, 24mm spanner, and again, no air tools. And you really don't want to be struggling. If you're struggling with this, you're going to break the tool or break the threads, damage the bushing. It means it's not level, it's the wrong, there's something gone wrong somewhere. So you haven't cleaned out the axle properly, there's rust in it, it's rust jacked, or whatever the case may be. You want to make sure you get all these right first. And as you can see, this is going in nice and easy. I'm not struggling, but it's putting nice even pressure, which is so important. You see the rubber part of the bushing is coming in the back. You can take that bit off if you want. That's not really the end of the world. Just make sure you put it back before you put it up, because otherwise it's going to be rattling around and you're not going to be able to track it, you're not going to be able to do anything. But I just leave it on because it doesn't really get in the way. And if you do take it off, it is a thing you can forget to put back on. Right, we're close. Now, I'm all the way around. Just snug it, loosen the wood. You can see the bushing, well I'll show you in a minute, but the bushing's just sticking out a couple of mil. That's why it's important to get this lined up, because otherwise it won't allow you to get it all the way in. So let's just put that back. Not the end of the world, but it just helps us with a bit of room. And there we go, the right tool for the job makes things so much easier. You're not struggling, you're not trying to smash it with a hammer or do something. It's just so simple. And there we go. So I just double check my marks are lined up absolutely perfectly. Sorted. Sorted. So that's now in. As you can see, we've got no gap around here, so we can check that. That's okay. Our rubber stops on, but like I said, you can take that off, but just make sure you put it back on, because otherwise it will be rattling around in there. And that's it. Now what we need to do is get it all back together. But that's as easy, well, how easy it is, using the right tool, pushing on bushings. And they're all more or less the same. There's loads of tools out there for pushing on all types of bushings, and they're more or less all do this. They do it the same way. They've got different attachment, different cups, different things for, you know, for different size bushings and so on and so on. So yeah, and I've known people to buy second-hand axles because they don't have the right tool, and you know that just costs more money. And you buy the right tool, you'll be able to use it and use it and use it over and over again. It does more than just Astras as well, so it doesn't just do one particular model of cars, which is handy. You know, not just Astras. I can't think of the other things it does, but I know it does other things. And there we go, Severas as well, because I've got to do is Severa as well, so it does Severas. Anyway, but there we go. Two bushings on, and now I need to put the cup back on, so I'm not going to show you that because I showed that in the other one. Just put this retaining cup back on. Now, that's what I need to put on. So I can either, it's actually, if I get it the right way, Leon. So what I can either do is I can either put the bolts through there and lift it up, or I can just lift up the axle. Doesn't really matter. I just prefer to put that back on. I've got it all marked up so I know where it is. Actually, with this one, come to think about it, just as well I didn't, because on this one I can't push the bolts all the way through. Now, see, just as well I spotted that, didn't think of that. A while since I've done one of these. So what I need to do first is actually push this through, not tighten it, but just get it through, because once it's up I can actually tighten that in place. So there we go, I can now tighten that in place and the bolts through. So I'm going to do that, move the camera, get it adjusted, put this all back, give it back to the customer. 40. Springs off, and I'm just going to put these two bolts in here, well this bolt in here and these three bolts up there first. Then I'm going to tighten these up properly, because then I've got something to swing off, loosen the shocks again, and then fit the springs. So this part, there's nothing I can really show you because you're not going to be able to see anything. It's just banging this bolt in here first, like that. Tightening that up fully. But before I tighten these two bolts up fully, I'm going to tighten the actual cup up here with the 3 E18s. I'm going to tighten up that fully. I'm going to double make sure that they're tightened up fully before I tighten up these. Well, actually, no, I can't do that thinking about it. What I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to set this up to its ride position first and then tighten these 2 bolts last. So that's what we need to do first, and then we can go from there. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's to set up to its ride. So I'm just going to tighten up these 3 bolts, then I'll show you. I'll just press this up with the transmission jack, get it to its level so it's like as if it was on the floor, tighten up these 2 bolts, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, let's get cracking. What I've done is I've disconnected the shocks and I haven't put the springs in because there's no point me fighting against shocks or springs to try and get this axle up. It's pointless. It's going to be harder to do it, and there's no point, especially when you're up on a lift. The harder it is for me to jack this up, I could jack it up too much and the car could fall off and squash me, which is obviously what you don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these up level, which is about there. I can now tighten these bolts on both sides, and then I can worry about putting the springs and the actual shocks back, and that's it. But at least I know when the car goes down, the bushings aren't going to be twisted and stretched, and they're going to last a lot longer. So once I've banged them in, we'll put the springs and shocks in and call job done, sorted. Right, so let's just lower this down. We don't need it completely out of the way because we might need to adjust it slightly to put the shock back on. Put both springs in. Make sure they are lined up in the holes, which that one is. You're not going to be able to see me do the other one, but you're going to get the idea. Now, both springs are in. So what I'm going to do, very slowly, kick the camera. I'm going to do that first, just because, you know, why not? Just make sure these springs are in. They both decided to pop out. Happens when you normally put the other one in. Pump that up just to kind of keep them there. I'm not worried about compressing the spring, but what I am worried about is the shock. So I do need to go up about ½ an inch. Because what you want to do is line up the shock bolt perfectly. If you don't, and you try and come in with the shock bolt at an angle, you're going to either destroy the bolt or destroy the threads in the axle. Either way is very annoying and costly. So what I'll do is I'll just get you around here so I can show you exactly what I mean. Now, you're not at the exact right angle, but you'll get the idea. And as you can see, that bolt is not dead straight. And for me to get that in, I most probably could start threading it, but I'm threading it at an angle. So again, just a slight lift with the axle, just like that. And what you want to be able to do is screw it in by hand, like that. A good bit of the way first. See how easy that is? Now, if I had no pressure on that axle, there's maybe an inch this will drop. So very, very simple like that. I'm just going to do the other side, and then I'm going to screw them in. Now what I'm going to do is just screw them in most of the way with that, and just squeeze them tight then. Factory specs, that's the wrong size, might help if I get the right size. Kind of a medium to heavy grunt. Remember, this is a very long ratchet, so click, click. So there we go, people. Sorted. Right, so that's it. Rear wish, but start again. So that's it. Rear axle bushings on a 2008 Astra. More or less very similar to most cars. You just might need a slightly different kit, but more or less the same. Some of the Peugeots, you can't change the bushings in. Some of the older ones, that once the axles go, you need a huge machine to do it, and you just replace the axle, but that's not the case on this one. So everything's back in place, but it is vitally, vitally important to get this tracked on a proper machine, because if you've got them slightly twisted, you will, there's not a lot of room, but there is a little bit of tweaking you can do on this. That's why it's always good to mark everything to, you know, so you more or less get it back very, very close, but the extra couple of percent, just put it on a tracking machine and you're going to be sorted. And that's it. All I've got to do is bang on the wheels, take it for a test drive, make sure everything's okay. I've put the handbrake cables back, so they're all good and back on, clips in place, and that's it. Sorted, people. So yeah, there you go. So look, hope it helps. Thumbs up, subscribe, all the usual. Don't forget, links up here, links down below. But most importantly, don't forget, get your hands dirty. See you for the next one. Sorted.